I'm Miles, and you're listening to the House of EdTech with my daddy, Chris Nessie.
Coming up on this episode of the House of EdTech podcast, we're going to ring in the new year. We're going to talk about generating some awesome things from Google Forms. We've got some feedback from episode 100. And we're going to talk about my one word for 2018. Let's do it. Welcome to the House of EdTech podcast. I am your host, Chris Nessie. The House of EdTech explores how technology is changing the way teachers teach and the impact that technology is having in education. I discuss technology that is changing our classrooms and schools, and I share tools and tips that you can hear today and use tomorrow. You're going to hear the stories of teachers, leaders, and creators just like you. The purpose? Whether you use it or not, technology is changing the way you teach and how your students learn. And Happy New Year and welcome back to the House of EdTech podcast. It is 2018. This is episode 101. And I'm still Chris Nessie. Welcome back, everybody. I haven't seen you for about 3 weeks via this podcast. Now, if you're a subscriber to Podcast PD, maybe you listened to the 12 Days of Podcast PD, which was a series that Stacy, AJ, and I did from December 25th through January 5th, where each day we each separately made a podcast recommendation. Some were education-based, and some were, as I like to say, guilty pleasures. But they're very short episodes. And hey, if you're not subscribed to Podcast PD and you're interested in more than just my voice, you can go over to podcastpd.com/subscribe, and we release that podcast every 2 weeks. And that is another version of Anywhere on the Go professional development. And we would certainly love feedback on that show if you listen to it. If not, hey, go over and check it out. I'm recommending it, right? So it must be good. But I got to tell you, I have missed you guys, and I have missed you, because we just went through the first 100 episodes of the podcast, and as I said, all throughout 2017 and leading up to episode 100, I was very excited, and I really feel like I accomplished something. Have I arrived as a podcaster? No, because now I just tell people, as of this episode, I apologize for the first 100, because I'm always learning something new and tweaking it. And I don't know what tweaks I will make here in 2018, but I know that I will probably change a few things about the show. I mean, the core is not going away. So if this is your first episode and somebody told you about the House of EdTech, don't worry. We're not completely revamping and changing the podcast here as we enter the next century. But I do have some ideas, and some different things will change, but the core will remain the same, such as the EdTech Thought, the recommendation, the House of EdTech VIP, and of course, great featured content, whether it's me by myself, me and, my wife, Caitlin, or me and a guest. I know I'm definitely going to have some more in-studio guests. So I'm really looking forward to, and I'm excited about 2018 and everything that podcasting can bring me. But thank you for tagging along for the journey. I really appreciate it. And if this is your first episode, hopefully you hit that subscribe button and you become part of the House of EdTech community. And not only by listening to it, but we do have a growing Facebook community. So if you head over to chrisnessie.com/Facebook, you can become a part of the House of EdTech Facebook group, which is really fun and exciting. We have some great conversation over there, and I would love for you to be a part of it if you aren't already. Now, as I had just said, we went through the first 100 episodes, and I have a little piece of audio feedback from or about episode 100. And this piece of feedback comes to us from a good friend of the program and somebody who I really fully anticipate to start his own podcast here in 2018, and that is Derek Larson. So, Derek, let's hear your feedback from episode 100.
You have one new message. Hey, Chris, it's Derek with EdTechBabble.net. Just wanted to congratulate you on episode 100 and tell you that it was fabulous. Love listening to you and your pops. Mr. Nessie Prime, as I'm going to be calling him in my head, the original, right? You know, I love that we've had the carbon copy cloner for 99 episodes. About time we get introduced to the original Mr. Nessie. So, fantastic job. I loved the fact that you and your dad had some excellent banter that only a father and son can pull off. So much fun. I love that he was busting your chops because that's always good times too. But your dad legitimately dropped some extreme wisdom bombs on us, and I was loving it. Absolutely incredible work. You know, great talk, great ideas for administrators, great ideas for educators, and I love the fact that he pointed out, you know, really family's got to come first. And I've always tried to have that approach, but he really killed it. So great job. Loved it. Wonderfully done. And I'm looking forward to the next 100 and then on. So have a Merry Christmas. Hope you had a great holiday season and excited to have you back for episode 101.
Thank you very much, Derek. And I did, before playing this here on the episode, I did share the audio feedback with my dad over the holidays while we took a little break here, again, to spend a lot of time with family. And me and Kate and the boys, we did have a fantastic holiday season. If you'd like some more insight into our holiday season, then go check out Kate's podcast, the Lifelong Learning Podcast. Episode 11 is the latest one that I appeared on. And we talked about actually some of our financial strategy through the holiday season between Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's, and all the different things we do. And of course, if you're not subscribed to Kate's podcast, you want to head over to katenessie.com/subscribe. And her podcast is the Lifelong Learning Podcast, which I sometimes appear on. And while she doesn't tackle, you know, the world of education, she is sharing what she is learning, and it's a really good show. So, of course, I'm going to support her in her efforts as a podcaster. Love you, dear. And if you haven't listened to episode 100, again, if you're new and maybe you started with the How to Podcast series, which was episodes 96 through 99, then please go back to chrisnessie.com/100 and check out a great candid conversation that I had with my dad, John Nessie, who is, now I could call him this too, you know, Mr. Nessie Prime, but that makes me think of Transformers, and that's a whole other podcast. Maybe we'll do an episode about Transformers. Probably not, but hey, who knows? I'm having fun. I'm just happy to be here behind the microphone. And before we move on, I do want to shout out and thank my awesome supporters. That's where the support for this episode came from. If you're interested in becoming an awesome supporter and you appreciate the content and you want to help to support what we're doing here, you can go to chrisnessie.com/awesome. And normally I shout them out at the end of the episode, which I will do. But hey, this is my podcast. I want to shout them out here as well. So thank you to Eric Kurtz, Dan Gallagher, Peggy George, Jen Giffen, Mark Grindell, Jeff Herb, Scott Titmus, and Brent Warner for all of your support. Again, chrisnessie.com/awesome is the place you can go if you're interested in supporting the podcast. That's all I have here at the top of the show. Let's head over to my first EdTech thought of 2018. For this episode's EdTech Thought, I have decided to call it New Year, New Nessie. As I wrote this EdTech Thought and kind of put my bullet points down and took notes, the first question I wrote was, am I relevant? Now, the reason I wrote this is because of late, I've been having a lot of self-doubt. As you know, if you've been listening to the show for any length of time, you know that I do have the desire to move into a more EdTech-related position. Currently in a high school classroom where I teach social studies, and while I enjoy social studies and working with students, you know that something along the lines of technology facilitator or technology coach where I can foster PD opportunities for educators, this is where I really feel in my heart of hearts I can best serve the world of education. But I continue to have doubts about two aspects of this desire. Number one, will it ever happen? Number two, this might surprise you, is it what I truly want? Now, while I believe I would thrive in a position where I could make a daily impact on teacher professional development and really get my hands dirty guiding teachers and co-planning lessons and not observing, as a supervisor, but helping teachers do technology better in the classroom and just have sound teaching instructional practices. As I record this, I have doubts. This next idea could be interpreted as self-serving or vain. However, it is not my intention. I've been doubting my relevance in the world of education. Now, the facts tell me that I am relevant. You're listening to my words right now. And even if this is your first episode, that means I've done something right, or somebody who has previously listened to the show has let you know about it. If you've been listening for prior to right now, I must have done something right, either through Twitter or groups that I'm a part of. I was able to spread the word, and now here I am in your head. You're listening to words right now, and when I started this podcast, I didn't know if you would ever discover my voice and then actually find value in it and what I'm doing and sharing here on the House of EdTech. When I started the show, I knew I would profit, and I don't mean dollars and cents. The knowledge I knew I would gain as a content creator and interviewer, how could I not learn and grow when I've had the opportunity to speak to amazing people from Tom Murray, Joe Sanfilippo, and Tony Sananis, Jennifer Gonzalez, Monica Burns, and literally every person who has appeared on the podcast. I know more today than I did in January of 2014 when I started, but I know today that I'm not as smart as I'm going to be in another 4 years and another 4 years, etc., and so on. This podcast has afforded me the opportunity to be the co-host of Podcast PD with Stacy and AJ. I'm also the producer of the Google Teacher Tribe podcast with Matt Miller and Casey Bell. I now also produce the Assist Learning podcast hosted by Jennifer Kronk, and also the Dads on Deck podcast. I love podcasting so much. That's where this has all gotten me. I love sitting here and creating content that could help you or the people who listen to the other shows. I love helping others create content as well. Some other points that I have here and questions I had, these are easy answerable questions. Do I have 100,000 followers on Twitter? No, I don't. I actually just passed the 5,000 mark. And that blows my mind. There are 5,000 people who have access to what I think on Twitter. That's amazing. Thankful for every one of them. Will I ever have 100,000 followers? Maybe. Does it matter? I mean, if I'm just talking to myself, that might make me crazy. I'm doing that right now, but I know you're listening. I see all sorts of people with more followers, and I often scratch my head because I've never heard of so many people and wonder what they are putting out into the world that have so many people interested in their thoughts. More often than not, other people aren't creating or putting out the value that I believe I am. So sometimes I honestly get a little jealous. On the other side, there are those that are considered edu rock stars or edu celebrities, which I think people put way too much stock in. Has this gone to some people's heads? Absolutely. I would like to see the teaching profession as a whole be held in a higher regard, rather than see one person be the king or queen of anything. I can't change education by myself. I'm focused on learning and helping you. That's right, just one person, you. We have a great thing going, and I'm glad that you take the time to learn and grow with me. To address my original question, am I relevant? The answer is certainly yes, and you just helped me get to that answer. I've just figured out that I really just want to be more relevant to more people. That's my EdTech thought. And now it's time for the EdTech recommendation. And this episode, the recommendation is Certify-em. That's CERTIFY''EM. Certify-em is a relatively new Google Forms add-on that makes it possible to not only give students their grades the right way, it also issues them a certificate for passing a quiz or a test that you've given through Google Forms. To use Certify-em properly, you should install it and enable it before creating your next quiz in Google Forms. When you enable Certify Them on a form, it will populate a couple of required fields in your form and ask you to specify a minimum passing score. Complete those fields, then write your quiz, and set your answer key just as you would for any other quiz that you've already done. When students complete the quiz, they will automatically receive a PDF certificate in their email inbox if they passed the quiz. Certify Them was developed by the same person who developed the extremely popular Flubaroo app, which I've talked about early on in the podcast. It's really cool. I've kind of tested it out, I've played with it, and I'm actually looking forward to implementing it here at the beginning of 2018 as we get into the spring with some quizzes and things that I have planned for my social studies class. If you've used Certify Them, I would love to know your experience. Leave a comment in the show notes for this episode at chrisnessy.com/101, as in episode 101. If you've never heard of it, I'd love to know what you think if you do try it. That's my EdTech recommendation. And now it's time for the featured content of this episode. At the top of the show, I wished you a Happy New Year. So, once again, Happy 2018. If you're listening to this well past January of 2018, hey, it's never a bad time to say Happy New Year, because it's never a bad time to think about changes you want to make and how you can be a better person, a better teacher, or be a little more focused and intentional in everything that you do, or maybe one aspect of what you do. So the featured content for this episode revolves around the one-word phenomenon. According to GetOneWord.com, one word creates clarity, power, passion, and life change. The simple power of one word is that it impacts all 6 dimensions of your life: mental, physical, emotional, relational, spiritual, and financial. Simply put, one word sticks. There is a word meant for you, and when you find it, live it, and share it, your life will become more rewarding and exciting than ever. According to the website myoneWord.org, which is a different website, picking your word is very easy. Choose just one word that represents what you most hope you will do and focus on for an entire year, and it's a simple process. Let's go through it together before I share some one words with you. Determine the kind of person you want to become. The first step is to simply take some time and decide what kind of person you want to be at the end of this year. This goes beyond simply being healthier and wealthier, but it must drive deep into your soul and who you are. What about the condition of your heart? What about the kind of person that you're meant to be? Identify the characteristics of that person. Get a picture of that person and then simply identify their major characteristics. Is that person gentle? Is that person generous? What are the qualities of the person you want to become? Pick a word. Once you have a list of the characteristics, simply pick a word. One word. There might be 15 things you want to change, but you must resist this temptation to promise you will do them all. Instead, simply commit to one word. Now, I put out the call on Twitter in December and into January, and we had a number of people who reached out to share their one word and why. Let's get into it. Again, this is before I give you my one word for 2018. So I want to thank everybody in advance, and we're going to start with Amy Storer. And this came in via chrisnessy.com. Amy is at TechAmyS on Twitter. She's from Montgomery, Texas, where she is an instructional coach and technology integration mentor. Amy's one word is yes. And Amy goes on to say this. This word is all about saying yes to risks and growing as an educator. It is also a thank you to all of the wonderful people in my life that have said yes to me to get me to where I am today and where I will go tomorrow. End quote. Amy, I like the word yes, and I'm glad you shared it here on the House of EdTech. Check in later in the year to let us know how you're doing with your one word and what difference it's made for you. Next up, Carla Hagmeister, and this also came in via chrisnessy.com, And Carla's Twitter handle is at KHA Gruns, Gruns. And Carla is a school board member and a parent. And Carla's one word for 2018 is intentional. And Carla shared the following message with me. As a working parent and a new school board member, I realize that there will be a lot coming at me. Our district needs to pass a bond to build a new elementary school. Kansas public education funding is the subject of a lawsuit based on adequacy and equity issues. More kids and families are facing issues of poverty, mental health issues, and more. In this year, I must be intentional in all parts of life. Are my decisions and actions based on intentional processes? I think I will be constantly measuring my decisions using that word. Am I doing what I intended to do? Are my/our actions having the intended results? Carla, it does sound like you're going to have a busy 2018, and really all I can say is, yes, be intentional, and just from reading your words here and the types of questions you're asking, I think you're going to be fine, and I think that you will do the things needed to do as a board member, and I wish you all the success here in 2018. And please check in later in the year to let us know how it's going, and let us know if that bond passes. Let us know how your school district is going to be improving and growing and doing even more wonderful things for the students in Kansas. So thank you so much for sharing that on the podcast. Next up, we have Carlos Garza. Carlos is actually a newer member of the House of EdTech Facebook group, and he shared this via the website. He is at EduGoogDroid on Twitter, and that's EduGoogDroid. And Carlos is a teacher at Juarez Lincoln High School. He's the campus technologist, and he's also a G Suite for Education certified trainer. And Carlos is one word for 2018, and I really like this, and I don't think he's sucking up or kissing up to me, but Carlos's one word is podcast. And he shared something very simple. Carlos is determined to have his first podcast live for people to listen to by the end of January. So as I record this and release it here on January 14th, Carlos has about 16 days to get his podcast out to the world. And once he does, you will be hearing about it here first. And I'm actually looking forward to, and Carlos doesn't know this, but he's going to hear it right now. I'm probably going to reach out to you, Carlos, and have you here as a guest on the podcast to talk podcasting and to learn more about what you're doing, and share your story, because we've connected, we've spoken through Twitter and now through the Facebook group. And I'm looking forward to getting you here on the show and promoting all the wonderful things that you are doing. So thank you very much, Carlos. I really appreciate you reaching out and connecting and sharing your one word here on the podcast. Next up, we have two audio ones. First from Andy Milne, and this comes in via SpeakPipe. Take it away, Andy.
Hey, Chris, this is Andy Milne, originally from London, England, but now living and teaching in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. I'm on Twitter as @CarmelHealth, and I'm a health teacher. Teaching in a very large high school with almost 4,000 students. My word for 2018, following on from resilience, advocacy, provocation, and collaboration. This year I've chosen environment. My words usually attend to something that I've wanted to weave into my teaching but haven't yet done so. So my aim with environment is to remind my students the environment around them can make or break their health, particularly in terms of healthy behaviors and decision making. I also want them to realize that they too are part of somebody else's environment and that they have the ability to make that environment better. At home, I also want to make sure that the environment at my own home is conducive towards certain behaviors, towards healthy living, better sleeping, and more positive actions between my two kids, my wife and myself. So there you go. Thanks very much, Chris.
No, thank you, Andy. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I know that you saw some of the tweets I put out. So thank you for sharing your one word of environment. And I think your justification is awesome. And I also liked that you shared your previous one words as well. If you're not connected with Andy, he is a fantastic phys ed teacher. I've had some interactions with Andy, via being a connected educator and whatnot. He is on Twitter at Carmel Health, and that's ARMELHEALTH. Of course, there will be a link in the show notes at chrisnessy.com/101. And thanks, Andy. Next up, we have Nate Nagel, no stranger to the podcast. former guest of the show, and this came in via the old House of EdTech hotline. Take it away, Nate.
Hey, Chris, this is Nate Nagel, and I'm not sure if I missed the deadline for this or not.
You didn't miss the deadline.
But I figure I would submit it anyway. My one word for the year is focus. Being able to go in and do a lot of things and get excited about stuff, but really focusing on the important things, picking the key elements of what I want to do, and being able to execute them properly. So my year and my word is on focus. Thanks so much.
You are very welcome, Nate. And really, other than the House of EdTech Smackdown, it's never really too late to send stuff in because I'll just include it in a later episode, so you got it in right on time. And I really like the one word for 2018, focus. And you're not the only person that I know who is going to be using the word focus here in 2018. Before I get to that, if you're not connected with Nate, make sure you do so on Twitter. He is at Mr. Nagel, and that's MrNaGele. And I'll also include a link to Nate's appearance on the podcast where he talked all about how when he's absent, he's able to still integrate technology and not really be absent in how he utilizes video on days that he's not there. But sticking with one word 2018 and the idea of focus, AJ Bianco's word is also focus. And I'm not going to tell you Stacy Lindis's word because this is a unofficial commercial for, and see, here's where like podcasting kind of has a flux capacitor. Let me explain. As I record this episode is released on January 14th, 2018. The next episode of Podcast PD that's going to be released as I'm recording this is going to be on Wednesday, January 17th. That episode was recorded before I sit here as I'm recording this episode. And in that episode, the three of us, Stacy, AJ, and I, go through our one words for 2018. Now, my original word for 2018 was going to be helper. And then I became a little disenchanted with the idea of the one word concept. And I initially went with, I'm not going to pick a word for 2018 when we were recording Podcast PD episode 21. But through that conversation, which I'm not going to tell you why I wasn't going to pick a word, so I'm going to tease you to go over to podcastpd.com/21 after January 17th, 2018. In that episode, you can hear me talk about why I moved away from helper and wasn't going to pick a word. But through that conversation, I wound up picking a word. And it's not helper, but it's flow. Because in 2018, I just want to go with the flow. I put a lot of pressure on myself. I stress out about, am I going to get an EdTech job? Am I going to continue to be happy? Am I making an impact? Am I doing, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm deciding I'm still going to be a helper. I'm still going to be a pusher. I'm still going to be me. But the thing that I'm going to focus on is to just kind of roll with it and go with the flow. I think I've always kind of done that, but I'm going to be a little bit more intentional. And really, when you think about the one word concept, whether it's flow or focus or podcast or intentional, it's really just kind of being aware and, being mindful, another one word. So whatever your word is, be focused on it, be intentional about it, and really just be the best you that you can be. If you'd still like to share your one word for 2018, I would love to have you do that. You can go to chrisnessy.com/101 and you can leave a comment on the show notes for this episode, or you can go to chrisnessy.com/feedback and I will also give you a number of ways that you can get in touch with me here on the podcast. So thank you to those that shared their one word already. If you're not following, check out the hashtag OneWord2018 or OneWord18 or just hashtag OneWord on Twitter, and you'll be able to connect with all sorts of people in and out of education who have chosen their word and are a little more focused and intentional about what they'd like to do and be here in 2018. That's the featured content. Now it's time to meet the House of EdTech VIP. And the House of EdTech VIP for episode 101 is Mr. Christopher Harris. Chris Harris is at principal_H on Twitter. Chris is from New Jersey, and he is currently the Director of Technology and a principal of the Burling School in Pennsauken Public Schools. He's also an organizer of Sped Camp New Jersey, which you can connect with at SPED Camp NJ on Twitter. And he's also a new member to the EdCamp New Jersey planning team here in 2018. Here's why Chris Harris is awesome. First, I saw him very recently at Ignite STEM in Princeton, New Jersey, and it's always great to see Chris because he's kind of been with me and connected and really supportive of a lot of things that I've attempted to do, from, the podcast PD Twitter chat and seeing him at conferences and participating in sessions. I've been in his sessions. He's come to things that I've done, and he's just an all-around good guy. He's awesome because he truly embodies leading by example, and he works tirelessly to promote good professional development with the teachers he leads and works with. You'll find him at many education events here in New Jersey throughout the year, so odds are if you attend events in New Jersey, New York, or Pennsylvania, you can actually physically connect with Chris Harris. So as we wrap up episode 101, congratulations to you, Chris Harris. You are the House of EdTech VIP. Hey, thanks for checking out this episode of the House of EdTech podcast. Thanks again to everyone who shared their one word 2018. Again, I'd like to know what your word is, so let's keep this conversation going. Go to chrisnessy.com/101. If you want to get in touch with me in other ways, just go to chrisnessy.com/feedback. If you enjoy the House of EdTech podcast, and hey, we've done this 101 times now, do me a favor. Tell somebody else about the podcast. If you share the show on social media, use the hashtag House of EdTech. Also connect with the Twitter account at House of EdTech. You could also become an awesome supporter of the show, just like Eric Kurtz, Dan Gallagher, Peggy George, Jen Giffen, Mark Grindell, Jeff Herb, Scott Titmus, and Brent Warner. Thank you guys for all of your support. For as long as you've been doing it, your contributions are certainly making things happen here in the House of EdTech. If you are interested, just go over to chrisnessy.com/awesome. The next episode of the House of EdTech, of course, will be episode 102, and we're going to have a very special in-studio guest, Mr. Joe Juba, also known as Bowtie Joe. He's a colleague of mine at New Brunswick High School. He's a math teacher, and I'm very excited to bring you a conversation with him on January 28th, 2018. Make sure you're subscribed. If you're not. If you are, thanks for being subscribed. I really appreciate that. Some other things that I want to throw in here at the end. If you got to this point, thank you so much. Let me know. Send me a DM on Twitter. I want to get more feedback from you here in 2018. So if there's some things you want to see on the show or hear on the show, please let me know. You know the ways to do it if you are a truly dedicated fan of the podcast. And if you're here this far, hey, go over to chrisnessy.com/Facebook. Get yourself in the Facebook group. Until next time, thank you for learning with me. And remember, using technology isn't difficult. Just give it a try. The House of EdTech is a proud member of Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio. Your voice is right here. For more great content, go to voiceed.ca. The House of EdTech is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. The Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. For more, go to edupodcastnetwork.com.